So I made a post about my 5 favorite authors the other day, and I thought that I would come on here and maybe talk to you guys a bit about like why I chose the people that I chose. And so anyway, let's jump into that. So starting at number 5, it's John Gwynne. I called him the slump buster, and I think it's for good reason. John Gwynne writes in really beginner-friendly, simple prose. And anytime that you're struggling to read or you're not really in the mood to read, I feel like his stories, they kind of pull you along. And he really does write great characters. And honestly, I love the Banished Lands too. I think that the world that he's created is really solid. So big fan of John Gwynne, and I would recommend him to basically readers of all skill level, let's call it, but I think he's really great for beginners as well. Next up was George R.R. Martin. I mean, he wrote A Song of Ice and Fire. I don't really need to say anything else. It's one of the best works of fantasy fiction ever written, even though it maybe never will be finished, but absolutely still worth reading. And A Game of Thrones itself is probably, in my opinion, the best first book ever as far as into a series. Now that said, the reason that I love George R.R. Martin is not actually A Song of Ice and Fire so much as I really love A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the Tales of Dunk and Egg. It's low fantasy, but the idea of the hedge knight meets the royal prince is just really interesting. And I love them traveling from roadside inns and all the descriptions of the food and going to the big tournaments and things like that. That's my jam, and I loved it. So anyway, he also writes darkness really well in a way that's mature and respects the reader, I feel like. So big fan of George R.R. Martin. After that, I've got Guy Gavriel Kay. So Guy Gavriel Kay is actually the author I've probably read the least in this list, but his prose, it just tickles my brain in the best way. So this was one of the books, The Summer Tree, that I read last year, and the way that it's written makes my brain happy. Like it's just fun to read. He also does a really great job with building lore and making the world feel old and lived in. And I feel like that probably has something to do with his experience on the Silmarillion, because something that's really cool about Guy Gavriel Kay is, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he helped Christopher Tolkien edit the Silmarillion and then wrote The Summer Tree as his entry into fantasy. And it's a phenomenal book with great characters, super well written, and he's just a great writer. I'm looking forward to reading a lot more stuff by him. But anyway, Guy Gavriel Kay gets nowhere near the amount of love and respect that I feel like he should get on Book Talk. I never hear anyone talk about him, and I think that's an actual shame. So this is me telling you, go out and read some GGK. After that is Tad Williams. So Tad Williams, this is my Dragonbone Cherry copy. You guys have probably seen a few too many times at this point, but it's like my favorite fantasy art maybe ever. Tad Williams writes classic fantasy really well. His Austin Ard series is incredible. I just finished Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn probably 2-3 weeks ago now, and it's fantastic. It's classic high fantasy at its best. He writes all the things that you would want in a way that is entertaining to read and it feels like it should for the genre. I don't know how else to say it. He really does a good job. And you can tell how good of a job he does because he, in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn specifically, really inspired George R.R. Martin in A Song of Ice and Fire. There's a Storm King, there's the White Walkers. They're clearly very inspired by the Norns from the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series. There's a Red Priests. There's a bunch of stuff in here that's like pulled straight from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. And George R.R. Martin's talked about how big of an influence that series had on his writing. So yeah, I guess maybe it's no wonder that I like both of these guys a lot. I think that their writing's fantastic, and Tad Williams kind of paved the way for the phenomena that turned into A Song of Ice and Fire. Anyway, and finally, I've got Steven Erikson. If you've read Malazan, you know what I'm talking about. Fantasy doesn't get better than that, and unfortunately, it tends to kind of ruin epic fantasy for you in the long run because nothing ever quite lives up to what Malazan does. I think Steven Erikson does all of the things that people claim that they want in their epic fantasy, and he does them in a way that is super rewarding for the reader. There is no hand-holding, as you know, if you've heard about Malazan at all. But because of that, you kind of explore and uncover the world with the characters. There's no, out-of-character expose dumps generally. You're kind of uncovering things with them. As far as giving the world a sense of age, uncovering civilizations and all of the things that come along with high fantasy, right? Nobody can do it better, really, and he does it from so many different points of view. He also, like people talk about reading diversely, he has tons of what I would consider to be diverse material, diverse characters in his books. And the way that they're written, it's just a part of the character. It's not like their whole identity. It's just a thing that people do, which I think is a lot like how real life normally is and really should be, is like you're just who you are. This one aspect of your life doesn't have to be everything that people know about you. Erikson just does that really well, and he does it in a way that's mature, and again, it just really respects the reader's intelligence. I think it's a shame that so many people struggle with Gardens of the Moon, because I understand why people feel like it's kind of a weak entry into the series, but in fact, it's so good. It's just, you don't realize how good it is until way further along, which, you know, I understand why it turns people off, but once you get to the point where you see the brilliance of it, it's like, man, like even his weakest point is in fact something that was so well thought out ahead of time. And the last thing that I will say that I just love about him, and it's the same reason that I love what I've read so far of Between Two Fires, is his writing just feels cinematic to me. It feels like you're watching a film in the way that he describes the world and the characters and just like the sense of space that he gives. Yeah, he also does, I wouldn't say his magic system's maybe the best I've ever seen. It's really good, but his descriptions of how magic affects the battlefield is unparalleled, and just how gnarly it is, honestly. Like, to think of being a foot soldier on the ground as people unleash waves of sorcery is scary. And I think that's awesome, because it lends a sense of danger to these battle scenes that he writes. So anyway, that's kind of a quick synopsis of why I love each of these authors. I'm sure that this list will change over time. I'm still relatively new in reading fantasy. I've only been, I'd say, hardcore reading for a handful of years now, really. So anyway, thanks for sticking around, and let me know in the comments your top 5, and I'd love to talk to you about why that is. Maybe I can add some new authors to my list this time next year. Anyway, thanks.